Thank you, and welcome to Inside the CISO's Office. I'm the producer, Lance Hart. Today, we'll be talking about securing the future, Forrester insights on post-quantum security. And I'm joined with, as always, John Brueggemann, consulting CISO, and Heidi Shea from Forrester, our special guest today, principal analyst, security and risk. Thank you guys so much. John, take it away.
Thank you, Lance. I appreciate it. Heidi, pleasure to see you here. Looking forward to talking about what's coming in the future. And it's been interesting to me to, excuse me, to really look into quantum computing and the risk that it presents for people in the future, companies, organizations with large data sets that need to be protected with good cryptography for 5, 10, 15 years. And I enjoyed reading the material from Forrester, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you today. So please, let's start with your slides, and we'll take it away from there.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for asking me to join you today for this discussion. Excited to be here. And you're right, this future, it's kind of like winter is coming.
Yes.
Or we could say maybe it's already kind of here. There is something really amazing that is on this horizon when we're thinking about quantum computing and everything that can come from it with quantum advantage. I have colleagues who focus on research here on the tech infrastructure side of the house. And in their research, they're talking about the huge performance potential of quantum computers for computations, enabling us to do things like simulations for chemical reactions,
Yes.
help with drug discoveries, simulate climate models, and more. So it's exciting times, but it's a real journey that we're taking here. And this is trek that we have to make.
Yes. It might be cold, but it is a journey.
Oh, yes. And you got to bundle up. There's stuff we have to do to prep.
Yes. Let's prepare.
And so just where are we today? And folks are going to get a copy of the slides after, is my understanding. So we had a few visuals that we're putting up today for this discussion because it's nice to have something to look at to help illustrate some of these concepts and things that we'll be discussing today.
So when we look at, I know when I've talked to a number of people, they don't see the quantum threat as being anything that they have to worry about. They're like, quantum computers, it's 5 years, 10 years at the, also it's interesting to see projections and predictions for when quantum computing will become usable. And they say, we have a 85% confidence 5 years out that quantum computing will be able to do something meaningful. Or they go up to 95% confidence when you go 10 years out. And that's what we're seeing on the graph there. But for people that don't understand the risk of what is at stake in terms of the risk to their data that's encrypted, they don't recognize that 5 years really isn't that long of a timeline for some of these quantum threats to manifest themselves. So I don't know if you want to say more about this particular graphic so people can understand what the car is that doesn't have the wheels or, where we are at, that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Like maybe that's like a futuristic car or some type of
a levitating car. Yes.
But it seems like a thing that's far away. We hear the occasional press release about breakthroughs in the number of qubits and quantum computing news. And it does seem like this futuristic thing. Like people talk about the promise of this. But I think what we're trying to illustrate with this image here is that, we are here. Things are moving along, and there are going to be some first mover breakthroughs that happen through the use of quantum computers in areas like quantum chemistry or optimization, doing sampling problems. But it seems slow moving at first, but it's going to get to a point where the computing power is just going to jump exponentially. It'll grow exponentially. And that's when we'll start to see some real big solutions come in many other areas of problem solving. And so it seems like it's slow moving, but at some point that's just going to shoot off like a rocket. And based on our projections, we were looking at potentially 2024, 2025 as a likely reasonable time frame where we'll see some type of quantum advantage with certain types of breakthroughs. So that's driving a lot of our focus in our research around post-quantum security. because there'll be things that we have to plan for, but there's also going to be some potentially cool benefits for security where you can apply quantum computers to help address. Like if we think about, optimization type issues, like maybe we can now use quantum computing to allow for optimization of attack correlation, for example. So ingesting all of the data that we've collected from logs, configurations, other types of situational data that we might have to give you some type of more closer to real-time ability to identify, mitigate threats. So that could bring some cool applications from a security side in terms of a benefit. But I know that we do have to consider the potential risk from quantum computing as well. So let's move on to that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. My first post on LinkedIn about post-quantum cryptography was in 2022, July of 2022, when NIST came out with their first round of algorithms that had passed the test. And that post was significantly popular. And that's what really sparked my interest in the risks that were associated with quantum computing, Shor's algorithm, how, it might look like we've got security with our existing encryption technology, but the other mathematic risk that's out there for the encryption is how quantum computing can break some of these, asynchronous, asymmetric cryptography. And we've got a slide up there now that talks about the use cases and what can be vulnerable. Let's talk a little bit about that from the Forrester standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the whole concern about quantum computers being able to break encryption, that's sort of the key driving force behind a lot of the worry. It's leading to people to have concerns now about harvest now, decrypt later types of
Yep.
attacks, especially for data that has a really long shelf life. It's forcing an overall rethink in how we approach data security in this post-quantum world. Questioning existing practices like data lifecycle management. A common thing that I see organizations do is, well, we need to delete this data. It is encrypted, so let's revoke the key, consider it deleted. And in a world where you have quantum computers that could potentially break this encryption, it's that maybe less of a viable approach to take. So how do we do things differently? It could also impact how we think about our data storage practices and controls, influence purchasing decisions that we have around technologies related to enterprise collaboration tools, secure communications tools. So even if you are buying these things today, evaluating them, you would want to do things like ask those vendors about their plans for post-quantum and quantum readiness. What can they do for crypto agility? But it's been a really slow path to awareness as well about the types of vulnerabilities like the ones that you see here. I feel like government and financial services are two of the big sectors that I've seen that are looking more into this more closely, trying to understand the vulnerabilities, what it means for their organizations, and try to actually plan for a future. But I'm kind of curious of what you've seen as well, John.
Yeah, it's interesting. So far, when I talk to vendors about what is their post-quantum cryptography plan, what have they started to do, a number of vendors have not really gotten, at least to me, they haven't, told me what their plans are for post-quantum cryptography, because it's really going to be hard for companies and organizations when I talk to them. I talk to usually 2 to 3 different organizations each week as part of my consulting CISO position for CBTS and on X. And I will broach the subject of quantum cryptography. Does the organization, have they thought about it? Do they have a plan? And so far, really only one organization has had a team that's focused on it. And they're a financial institution in Canada. They're like, yeah, we have a team. They're working on it. We are starting to identify where our data is and what kind of encryption we're using. And I'm like, yay, thank God. That's, part of what I do for OnX and CBTS is basically get the word out about security risks that are out there that people may not be thinking about. And this is one of them, because one of the other things I do is I help people improve their cybersecurity. And I can't tell you the number of vulnerability reports I've seen where there is still SHA-1 algorithms out there, and that's been depreciated for over a decade. So it takes a long time for people to migrate their encryption technology because it gets embedded in so many different products. And it's something that if the vendors aren't thinking about it, as you said, and if the organization doesn't know where they have encryption technology implemented, it's going to be very difficult to quickly identify your data. How is it being encrypted? Is it at risk? Do they have to change keys? There's a multitude of things that they want to consider. So part of this talk is really to get people to think about that and say, ooh, I should at least identify one or two people in the organization to say, let's start thinking about what we're encrypting. How long are we encrypting it? What's our disposal procedure and policy? So it was great for you to bring that up as well, that, some people think they can just revoke the key and that's made the data no longer a risk. And that's not true, not with what's coming down the pike.
And I think that's where being able to outline or at least understand the different types of vulnerabilities that can come from this is going to be a good starting point for a lot of organizations, because it's like you mentioned Shor's algorithm earlier. I mean, that is a key thing that people are going to hear again and again as they look into post-quantum security. Like, this is the thing that's going to let quantum computers go off and easily factor large numbers. That's the basis of PKI, public key infrastructure, and other asymmetric key encryption schemes. So that's the key concern here when we're thinking about key exchange.
Yes.
And people have asked, like, well, does this now mean that symmetric systems, are these safe? Like your AES 128, 192, 256. And I think the assumption and also the guidance that we've seen from NIST so far is that you can assume that if there are no weaknesses discovered within these, like, yes, it is safe with a caveat, because it comes back to key exchange.
Yes.
So if your system is using RSA or ECC to exchange those symmetric keys, then yeah, potentially if an attacker uses quantum computers to go break this asymmetric encryption then that you use for exchanging the keys, then you could use that to back out and determine what's the symmetric key.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting when you look at what NIST released as the candidates for a post-quantum encryption. Key exchange was one of the main components that they focused on for that obvious reason. Yes, you're going to encrypt something with AES. It's symmetric. It's not really vulnerable to Shor's algorithm. But how are you going to exchange that with somebody else? Oh, you're going to use asymmetric encryption. Oops, you just let that key get out of the bag, and now you have to worry about that as a risk. So as we move on to the next area here, I think what we want to make sure we see is to put sort of that optimistic, pessimistic timeline on there. And that this graphic might be a little confusing for some people to see. How do I interpret the two lines on the graph?
Yeah. It goes to the question of, well, how much time do we actually have? And it's like, well, what do you believe in terms of optimism or pessimism for this? So this is a common, I guess you could say, model, like Dr. Michelle Mosca's theorem of quantum risk, where she's looking at optimistic versus pessimistic probabilities of analysis, where when a real threat may be present. So the top line you see on the chart is the optimistic view of it's going to take a little bit longer. The bottom is the more pessimistic view of it's going to become a threat sooner in terms of probability. I mean, reality could be somewhere in between.
Right.
I guess my takeaway from looking at something like this is that the probability is not zero. It's happening.
It is definitely not zero.
It's like when, and that's a big question. And the consensus seems to be that with something like Shor's algorithm, it's hopefully, likely, not going to threaten PKI for maybe 10 to 15 years is one estimate. But it could be shorter if there are breakthroughs within that time. Shorter in the sense of I've heard estimates of 5 years could be a possibility.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, just think about if the pessimistic estimate is more accurate, and if, let's say, pick your favorite large vendor, IBM, Google, Microsoft, used to be Alibaba and Baidu, but they both have dropped out of the quantum game. But when you think about those big organizations that are investing literally billions of dollars, if they get a significant increase in the quality of their qubits and the ability to have stable qubits and do some of the other technology you have to do, then data that you're encrypting today in 2024, and you think it's going to be secure for 7 years, let's say, but they make an advance in 4 years or 3 years, suddenly your data that you thought was secure for 7 is not secure for 7. And what are you going to do? I mean, if you've been sitting on your hands thinking and sort of hoping that there'll be a drop-in replacement for your asymmetric cryptography algorithm, there isn't a drop-in replacement. NIST has warned everybody that there isn't a drop-in replacement for this. You really have to talk to your vendors. You have to plan for this, and you have to know where you have vulnerabilities and where you have risks. So it's good to have an estimate. So this is what you can be telling your superiors, but you need to be putting money in the bank for this project starting now in 2024 and be prepared, start to do your homework.
Exactly. And it's something like this that also makes it so hard because there's no, like, people just want to date some type of deadline, and it's something that you really have to set for yourself as an organization of, like, what is your, deadline of sorts that you're trying to work towards? Because that's going to vary a bit based on maybe the resources that you have to begin planning for and making the early steps for this type of migration, to things like also assessing, well, what is that long-term value of the data, the information that you have that's
Or
encrypted
risk.
today? That determines your risk level as well. And that's why I think we see, sectors like government, financial services really at the forefront of paying attention and actually trying to do something here.
Yeah. And that was a piece that also got my attention, was when NIST came out with their announcement that federal agencies have to do an inventory of where they have sensitive data and an inventory of their algorithms, and they had to have it done in 2024. That tells me that NIST and the folks that they work with, other 3-letter agencies, NSA, folks like that, the timeline could be even shorter for state actors to have quantum computing that can break this kind of data. It probably isn't going to be a risk for the average person on the street when they go to Google or go to Amazon and buy something. But if you're a large financial organization, you want to make sure that that data is encrypted for an infinite length of time. You probably want to put this on a shorter window and move more towards that pessimistic, there's a greater risk for your environment in that sense. So as we move on to our next slide that's there, let's talk about what post-quantum cryptography is.
Yeah, so this is more of a level set, because you'll hear the term get tossed around, also the term quantum resistant cryptography as well. And this is the goal of what these things are as defined by NIST. It's a system that's secure against both the quantum and the classical computers.
Yep.
And interoperate with the existing communications protocols and networks as well. And that's also why we hear such a great focus on crypto agility today. This ability to switch between cryptographic systems quickly without major changes, as a way of helping to prepare you for getting you there to use post-quantum cryptography, because it's not like a switch happens and all of a sudden you're all over onto the new stuff. There's this in-between period of where you'll have some of the old algorithms in use as well as the newer post-quantum ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going to be a simple task for people to implement a quantum resistant algorithm. Vendors have to prepare their products. There has to be testing. It's interesting. I read an article that Google has moved towards a quantum resistant algorithm internally, one that's not one of the standards, not one that NIST has pushed out. And so there's a whole question about whether or not organizations are going to be following a standard while the cryptography continues to progress. So it'll be something that people want to be asking their vendors. I know we've already said that, but keep it in the back of your mind. What direction are your, firewall vendors or your switching vendors or anywhere you have, encryption embedded into the product? maybe they're going to stick with traditional algorithms, but they do have a roadmap for upgrading the algorithms in place without having to do a forklift upgrade. That would be something you want to ask your vendors now in 2024 as you prepare, because some of that gear that you purchase, you keep it for 8 years, you keep it for 9 years, and that's going to be the time frame where you got to make sure that the algorithms can be upgraded in place.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because I think we need to let's move on. Let's talk about standards for a bit.
Yes.
Because where are we today here? Standards are a good thing. We also don't really have them in terms of worldwide, global ones at this point in time.
Right.
NIST is one of the main bodies that people and companies are looking to for standards. It's not going to be a situation in the future where it's one algorithm to rule them all. We're going to have multiple ones, different ones for different needs, also to hedge against potential future risk as well. So where we are today with the NIST is that it's in round 4 of their competition for the post-quantum cryptography, the algorithms, where they are the standards. And this is just a chart summarizing the names of ones that are in the competition.
Yeah.
And
this is this will be what the people want to ask their vendors. Are they following a standard to the degree that we've got standards, like you said? I think one of the benefits and one of the reasons people like NIST is that it's open. It's a public. Everybody gets to look at the algorithm. Everybody gets to test it. Everybody gets to bang on it. We won't go down the path of people that think that one of the advantages of encryption is to keep your algorithm secret, because that doesn't usually work out well. You want a well-vetted algorithm. But it was interesting. I was talking to a company in Germany, and they were not going to be using the NIST standards because of, I think, a little distrust on their part about how the United States operates with some of our standards and our partners. So they were going down and they were using the classical Macaleese algorithm for their encryption, and they were combining it with traditional encryption algorithms to have like a hybrid version. And I thought that was an interesting way to, it didn't really give you backwards compatibility. I think it gives you more complexity. So obviously you have to be able to program that into your gear. And they were a large telco, so they clearly knew what they were doing. But I think it's great to have these out there so that people know which algorithms have moved to the next stage so that they can start to plan appropriately.
Yes. And it's not just within the US. If we're looking at NIST, like this tends to be, from what we've seen, the competition that a lot of other countries and governments are looking to as well as a basis for their own recommendations, their own guidance that they're issuing within the country. Like Germany is a great example of this. Like we've also seen this come out of France as well, has issued their own recommendations, the UK, Australia, Canada, bunch of countries. Japan, I think we've seen also. South Korea was interesting because they had their own competition that's still in the works now in round 2. So there's stuff developing here on the standards front, which is great. At the same time, I think that's also making it a bit challenging on the technology side for the vendors who are offering their products, because the sense that I feel is that they're paying attention to this, of course, because they want their products to use these types of standards. But for the time being, it's almost like a wait and see. I suspect that once we actually have something final that's out there, we'll see a lot more related standards work, as well as a big push in the tech space to support this going forward.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the fact that we won't probably have, unlike AES, which is effectively a global standard and people can easily implement it and it's used across the globe, with these algorithms, we may not have a universal standard. So you may have to make sure, if you're a multinational, and you can standardize on a vendor, but if a country says we're not going to be using a NIST encryption in our environment, suddenly your vendor has to have a platform that supports more than one. And then you have to be able to do the handoff from one encryption technology to another. As they say, the future is always in motion, and and may you live in interesting times. I think we're heading down an interesting times path.
For sure. And let's let's keep it interesting. Yeah, moving on to time to prepare. I mean, the signs are here. It's now. Like we've talked about standardization, this whole competition. A key date to keep in mind is April. April 10th to 12th is the next PQC standardization conference related to NIST. So I suspect after that we'll maybe get some more news, some more momentum happening in the tech space. And a thing I saw recently also came through some draft standards out of Europe, following DORA, so the Digital Operations Resilience Act. So there's something in there within their ICT risk management framework, which addresses encryption, cryptography. They're pointing to specifically proper cryptography management and crypto agility, which I think ties in very nicely with this need to prepare for post-quantum.
Yeah, I mean, the time is now to prepare, get a task force together. It doesn't have to be a huge one, but you want to have somebody who's got their eye on the ball. You start to identify where your data is, see which vendors have, started to think about it or started to tell you about it, and be prepared. You definitely want to be prepared. You don't want to have to try and bolt on something at the last minute and then worry about all the data that you've got stored in a format that's not as secure as you thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's a key thing also, I think you alluded to this earlier at the beginning, John, was that commercial viability of quantum computing is not necessarily the same as nation state viability of this technology. So it could be that a quantum computer exists today that's powerful enough to break existing encryption, but we just are not aware of it, because if you're the government that's discovered this, that's figured it out, you're not about to go announcing it to the world. You're just going to use it and start reading the encrypted communications.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things for me. I still remember this so vividly. I think it was probably about 10 years ago. I remember it was big news that NASA received a free gift of a Hubble telescope from the NSA, only they had to recalibrate it so that it looked outward to the stars rather than downward on the Earth. And NASA and the NSA had two of them that they weren't using. So, I like to remember or remind my friends that, what we see on TV is good. The military and the NSA have something that's way better. So if NIST is telling people in the government, you got to start looking at where you're storing your data and what kind of encryption algorithms, they probably know something we don't know. So let's plan appropriately. This isn't conspiracy theory talk. It's just, reading the tea leaves a little bit to say, it's time to focus on this. It's always a good thing to know where your data resides. It's always a good thing to know what's sensitive. Maybe you're collecting too much data. Maybe you should get rid of some of that data, have a good data retention policy that says, we don't really need all this data that's 8 years old, 10 years old. Let's get rid of it and really get rid of it. Don't just throw away the key. Actually get rid of the data, do data destruction, so that you have a smaller attack surface and a smaller footprint that you have to worry about 3 years from now or 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this whole change, it'll take time. Like you mentioned earlier, like SHA-1 was still in use for a long, long time after it was deprecated. We'll probably see the same thing here. I mean, even in preparation, as some organizations have been doing their own cryptographic discovery inventory, they're identifying, oh my gosh, we've got some really old algorithms in use that we didn't think we had, and
how did that SHA-1 algorithm get in there? Oh, we're using old TLS. That's bad. Yes.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, misconceptions about the lift that's required to do this as well, because I've spoken to some folks on the digital certificate side where they've talked to customers who are making the assumption that this is like migrating from TLS 1.2 to 1.3, and no, it's going to take more than that.
It's going to be a little more than that. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a hardware upgrade. I mean, you might be lucky and you might get away with, okay, we're going to time this so that in 2026 or 2027, we're going to upgrade all of our hardware and the vendors will have paid attention and they will, as we've got on the slide there, what can you do while you wait on the standards to be, firmed up? You want to put together your your data plan to say, where does it reside? What are we using now? And I'm going to put it in the category of cyber hygiene. It's just good due diligence.
It is, and it's amazing how so many things that we try to do here with data security just keeps coming back to these foundational elements of understanding the data. Like, what do you have? Is it sensitive? Uh, how does it flow? These key questions, and it's foundational, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It's one of the biggest challenges that I see my clients dealing with today is trying to answer these types of questions. So with the push for preparing for post-quantum, it makes a little bit more urgency beyond your standard, maybe compliance issues or third-party partner requirements around how do you manage this type of data. But now you have an added reason for focusing on this and trying to do it well, and
Yep.
also understanding the long-term value of this data and how you currently protect it.
Exactly. So I think we're done with our slides here. I think we only have a few more minutes left. Lance, have there been any questions that have come in?
Nope. Whoop. There we go. No questions yet, sir. No
All
questions.
Right. Just one thing I wanted to let folks know. There are companies out there, big companies, think IBM, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, that have quantum computers and are working on useful applications for them, not just in the cryptography space. It's interesting. IBM has been selling a quantum computer to hospitals for medical research, and I think they have 5 or 6 of them deployed at this point in time. And IBM is clearly putting a lot of research dollars into their program, and they have a roadmap where, for them in 2025, they have a chip they call Flamingo. It's going to have 5,000 gates, 156 qubits, which can just sound like noise to some people that haven't been following it, but it will have a lot more functionality, and they'll be able to do things with the software development kit that they have out there. You can actually write code that's quantum ready and can be run on, IBM has made some of their hardware available. And to me, it's exciting. It's fun. I'm looking forward to what the future brings. I want to make sure that organizations and companies plan appropriately. But do you have any final words, any last thoughts?
Actually, John, sorry, it was a perfect spot to jump in. We did have a question that came in. Who do you think the greatest risk is? Banks, hospitals, governments? Somebody said, I assume where the most money resides, but that's an interesting question that came in and right on topic with what you're talking about.
I would say that from a national level, governments are most worried about military secrets. They really want to make sure that nobody knows where the military assets are, and they want to make sure that if they're communicating with their assets, that's not something that can be broken easily. After the federal nation states, I would imagine financial organizations are going to be the biggest risk. Hospitals, I think, have the biggest potential for seeing advantages. I mean, because one of the biggest applications of quantum computing that I've been able to see in research is in the field of protein folding, and in the field of medical science. Whether or not this combination of drugs will be effective. How you write that program, I have absolutely no idea. But I think those are some of the things. So I don't see hospitals being at risk per se. I see them taking advantage of the quantum capability. But I would say nation states first have the most at risk with their assets and with their, not just their military assets, but their intelligence assets. And then it's financial organizations. What are your thoughts on that, Heidi?
I would agree. And I think related to the nation state one, the government related is probably things related to critical infrastructure.
Yep.
Like if you're thinking telecoms, utilities, the likes of that, where there's the potential for disruption that could actually have real world physical impact, and then that's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, once that the ability of breaking the asymmetric encryption is possible, more than just theoretical, but actually possible, the ability to manipulate transactions that are occurring over the internet so that you can't trust the integrity of the transaction and you can't trust, the confidentiality of it, that's the big risk. And that's where I think the financial firms are going to have the most exposure. And so they'll be the ones that are not just investing the most. I mean, Fidelity is highly invested in quantum computers at this point in time. Other large banks are going to be very interested in making sure that their transactions, remain confidential, have the right integrity, and are available when their customers want to make the transactions. I mean, it's the standard security components. So I hope that answered the person's question. Oh, look at that.
There's one more that came through.
Okay.
Would love to hear more on eavesdropping detection and QKD. Any comments around that?
No immediate comment on that. EKD, I'm not sure what that.
QKD.
Quantum key distribution.
Quantum key.
Yep, sorry.
Well, I'll let you talk first, Heidi.
I don't really have a view on this, I have to say.
Oh.
It's an area we should look more closely into. There was something that Germany, the BSI, had published pretty recently, some study that they did related to QKD that I've been meaning to dig deeper into. But at the moment, I don't really have a response to that question.
I do. Okay. I mean, it's interesting. There is the other part of quantum sort of mechanics in the context of cryptography, where some people are starting to use. There's a whole question about how random is your random number, and with quantum, not using quantum computers, but using features of the way photons move and the way that things are detected. I did read an article that there is a way that people are starting to use quantum characteristics to do random number generation that makes it truly random, or even a whole lot less predictable. And then the other part of it with quantum key distribution, that part, I have heard that there are ways that, I don't remember the company that was doing it, but they were enabling quantum, basically encryption of the keys without using a quantum computer. So if somebody was worried about eavesdropping on quantum key distribution, I would think that risk would be extremely low, but I haven't researched that specifically. But to me, it's a fascinating field. I've gone down several rabbit holes after getting into this topic. So, any last thoughts before we let you go, Heidi?
I think at this point, it's just bringing greater awareness to other folks internally within your organization, if you're the CISO, but doing it in a way that the sky is not falling, but it kind of is. We just don't know when, really, but laying the groundwork at least for getting perhaps other stakeholders that you'll need to rally behind you to help you with these efforts for this type of migration is step one.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. This is an awareness kind of a webinar. I wanted to raise the topic at the beginning of 2024, get it on people's roadmaps, get it on people's agendas, plant the seed so that way the board is not surprised when you said, hey, I need, $50,000 to start our, I'm just making up a number, kickstart our program for quantum readiness, both the encryption of our data and identifying our data. So awareness and letting people know that it's coming. It isn't coming in 2025 as far as we've seen, but it could be coming in 2027. So plan accordingly.
I guess you got to be ready for the quantum leap.
Start experimenting.
There you go, Lance. Well played.
Sorry, I've been waiting to use that this whole episode.
I understand. Heidi, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me to join in. It was great to be here.
Excellent. Lance, I think we'll roll it out.
Sure. Thanks as always, and take care.